All right, guys, this is my second shot at this because I just did it and it was 25 minutes long and it went away. So we've got 12.2 histograms. It starts on page 871. The real world link, it says that Alicia researched the average price of concert tickets and the table shows the results. So these are the average price tickets of the top 10 money earning concerts. It says fill in the tally column and frequency column in the frequency table. So we've got a range of $25 to $49.99, $50 to $74.99, and $75 to $99.99. And we need to enter how many tallies. And the tallies just represent how many, where they showed up in my table up here, my first table, and I'm just taking that information and putting it down here. And all the frequency means is that I added up my tally marks. Okay, so frequency is just adding up the tally marks. So go ahead and do the number 1 here, and when you come back, we'll talk about it. Pause the video now. So what I've done is I just went through and I kind of scratched out the ones that I did. Since you're using pencil, it's not a bad idea because you can just erase over it when you're done. But I showed that I had one person or one average ticket price of between $25 and $49.99. I had 7 of them that were between $50 and $74.99, and then I had 2 of the ticket prices fall between $75 and $99.99. So what does each tally mark represent? It represents the each concert, average ticket price for each concert. Okay, so it represents the concert ticket price. And then what is the advantage of using the frequency table? Well, obviously the frequency table helps because it can easily show you how many concerts had an average ticket price of, let's say, below $50 or below $75 or maybe above $50. Like if I said, oh, how many people had it above $50? I'd say, oh, these were above $50, so that's $9. Or $50 or more, I guess I should say, because I don't know how many are exactly 50. If I said below $75, that would be 8. It would be these 2 sets together. If I said below $50, it would be just this one concert. So that's the advantage of using the frequency table, is that the information is right there for you. And what is one advantage of using the first table? Well, the first table gives you specific data. Okay, it's not that it's a bad table, but it gives you specific data, but it's just kind of all spread out. Whereas what I like about the frequency column in the frequency table is that it tells you ranges and how many fall in between those ranges rather than have a bunch of scattered prices. Whoops. So interpreting data is something we're going to be working on quite a bit in this section. Data from a frequency table can be displayed as a histogram. A histogram is a type of bar graph used to display numerical data that have been organized into equal intervals. And intervals is really the main thing here because you notice that it's not like we've been looking at where it's just like 1, 2, 3, and how many are 1, how many are 2, how many 3. This is ranges of intervals of $25 to $49.99 and $50 to $74.99. And you'll notice that each of these intervals are the same amount. Now it says that these intervals allow you to see the frequency distribution of the data or how many pieces of data are in each interval. So over here it's just very basic, how many of these remote, in this case it's a remote control prices, how many of the remote controls were sold at these prices, okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many. And it's giving us ranges and prices so that we don't have just one of each one. We actually can say, okay, there's a couple in here, there's a couple here, 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 and here. Now, you notice that what I really want to point out to you are a couple things. There are no gaps in between the bars. I know that in the old bar diagrams, we used to do the whole, separate it, separate it, separate it, like this. But now you see that they're right butted up against each other. That reason is because, between this line and the next bar, there's no difference. It goes from $149.99 to $50. That's the jump in price. So they're right up against each other here. Then we've got a space here, and notice that we didn't just leave out this price range because it didn't have any planes sold there, we still have to represent that price range so that we can say, okay, we've got ranges from $25 to $174.99. In this price range, we didn't have anybody with airplanes, remote control airplanes. The other thing I'd like to look at on here is that the intervals are equal, all bars are the same width. That's not always easy to do when we're handwriting it, but we just have to try our best. We're not going to say, oh, here, this is one, and then this is another, and then, this is another, and then this is another. That's not how we represent a bar graph anyway. Always we have the same amount of width of our bars. So for example 1, it says to refer to that last histogram, which is the one on the cost of different remote control airplanes. And it wants us to describe the histogram. So starting first thing, there's a lot of different things we can say about this histogram. We can look at it and say, okay, we know that the price ranges for these airplanes are between $25 and $174.99. And that we are figuring out that there are, let's see, 9, 7, 1, 2, 1. So there are 20, am I getting this right? 16, yeah. There are 20 airplanes altogether, because if you see, we've got 9 airplanes sold here, 7 of them sold in this cost frame. This one had 1, this one had 2, 1 more over here. We add them all together, we say, okay, there's 20 remote control airplanes that we've priced here, and the prices are between 25 and, well, they didn't show this part, but between 25 and $174.99. And then it likes to say what the mode is. So the most often they cost between $25 and $49.99. And then maybe a good idea is to say where there's nothing recorded between that data and say, okay, there's no airplanes recorded that cost between $125 and $149.99. The second part wants us to say how many remote control cars cost, remote control airplanes cost at least $100. So when we're talking about at least $100, we're talking about, and this is where it comes in handy to understand our old inequalities. If it's under $100, it's not going to include this set right here. It's not going to include this set right here. It's not going to include the 150 area. It's just going to include the 20 to $49.99, 50 to $74.99, and 75 to $99.99. These are the ones that are less than $100. And so we know that there were 9, 7, and 1 added all together, and we can say that there were 17 remote control airplanes. Oh, cost at least. Ah, darn it. I just did this video. You think I'd remember these things. At least. Sorry, at least it's going to tell me the opposite. That it's going to cost at least that much. That it's going to cost more than $100. The $100 and the $150 to $174 range. So at least $100 means that it includes these two tables here. It would include this, but there's nothing there. So it's going to be 2 plus 1, which is 3. Sorry about that. I literally just did this. So at least $100, they're going to be 3 remote control planes. Oh, here we go. Okay, sorry. So now it's asking us to refer to that same one and figure out how many remote control airplanes cost less than $75. Here's my less than. Finally, I'm not insane altogether. All right, less than $75. So here's the thing. It can't include anything in the $75 to $99 range. It's less than 75, so it's not going to include 75. It's not going to include the 100. It's not going to include 125. It's not going to include 150. It's only going to include prices between $25 to $74.99. Okay? And so that's going to be this 9 and 7 put together, which makes 16 airplanes. So how many remote control airplanes cost less than $75? Not to include 75, less than, that would be 16 airplanes. So you can use data from the table to construct a histogram, and we're going to go step by step through that process. Example number 2 is going to step by step walk us through it. It says that the table shows the number of daily visitors to selected state parks. Draw a histogram to represent the data. So it says that the daily visitors to selected state parks, and it's got a slew of different values over here. Okay. Step 1 says to make a frequency table to organize the data and use a scale from 100 through 99 with an interval of 50. So it's giving us direct instructions to use an interval of 50. Sometimes they don't give us the intervals, and we have to figure that out for ourselves and come up with a good plan for ourselves. But they've given us what their intervals are going to be. So the first thing we're going to do to be able to figure that out is we're going to find the smallest and largest values in our data set. So coming over to our data set here, we need to find our smallest and largest. And our smallest one here is 108, and our largest is 382. So I know that my intervals, my ranges, need to be between those two numbers, and it doesn't have to start right at 108 because you don't want some crazy numbers to come up with because you have to figure out these number sets. So why not just use something round like 100 to 149, 150 to 199, and go from there. Okay, that way we don't have to do some crazy math. Okay, and we're using our intervals of 50. So I'm just going to go through, well, what they've already done for us. They just go through and you just kind of figure out, tally up, tick mark all the ones that you have. You have 108. Oops, sorry about that. 108, so that's in this range. 209, that would be down here. 171, that was over here. 152, right there. 236, right here. And you keep going until you're done, and then add them all up, and that's how you get your frequency side. And then you've got your frequency table. So making our wonderful frequency table isn't so bad. Next, we're going to use step 2, which is draw and label a horizontal and vertical axis. Include a title. Show the intervals from the frequency table on the horizontal axis, and then label the vertical axis to show the frequency. So we've got this labeled frequency, very generic frequency, and then it says daily visitors to state parks. Down here, that's the title of the whole thing, and then to represent our horizontal line, our axis, it's our number of visitors. And with graphs, you really should always be labeling so that everybody can understand what's in your graph. So they've given us, as well, they need us to enter in all of our intervals and then our frequencies. And once we did our frequencies here, we knew that the biggest number we needed was 8, and so you can make your frequency table over here skip count so that you make sure that 8's in your frequency table if it's already pre-drawn for you. Next, we're going to, for each interval, draw a bar whose height is given by the frequencies. So if there were two visitors to the state park, if there were 2 days where 100 to 149 visitors visited the state park, then we go up to 2. Right attached along next to it, we went up to 7. Then we went up to 8. Remember, these are all from our table here, and that's how we come up with our frequencies. And then we've got 1 for this, 1 for this, and 1 for this section. And these all represent our frequencies of each interval for the daily visitors to the state park. Okay? When we look at this, to be able to interpret it, we could say most of the days there were 200 to 249 people at the park, and we can say that the lowest amount at the park was between 100 and 149, and the most at the park was at any given day was 350 to 399. Okay. Oops. Sorry. I'm telling you, I did this already. All right, so got it. It says the table at the right shows a set of test scores. Choose intervals, make a frequency table, and construct a histogram to represent the data. Now, if you'd like to do this with me, then you can keep watching the video. But if you feel confident after seeing those steps in the last example, then you can pause the video now and then do it on your own and then watch mine, or you can fast forward through mine to see the very end answers. So if you are going to pause the video, pause the video.
Pause the video. Pause the video. Pause the video. Pause the video. Pause the video.
So the first thing that I'm going to do is find, step one, remember step one said find the smallest and biggest number in our number set. So I'm going to do that first, and I see that 72, is that my smallest? Nope, I've got a 68 here, so 72. And so okay, ignore that. Anyway, the largest number is 98, I think. And just, oh, look, 65 is a smaller number than 68. So just make sure you're getting the smallest and biggest numbers. And then based on these numbers, and I think I got the smallest and largest, I'm going to set up my ranges. So 65 to 98 is my range. And so I just have to make sure that I come up with intervals that will include those. And you can skip by tens, you could skip by fives. They only gave us room to skip by 10, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Let's say 65 through 74, then 75 through 84, and then 85 through 94, and then 95 through, 104. And now I need to go through and just take my test scores and put them in as tally marks over here to the left in my frequency chart. So either way, you can pause the video now and fill those in yourself. You don't need my guidance to do that. So pause the video and I'm going to fill in mine, you fill in yours.
Pause the video. Pause the video.
Pause the video! All right, so I used these ranges. If you're just coming to me after having done this on your own, you may have used different ranges, and if that's the case, then you probably will end up having different tallies along with different frequencies. So I've got a frequency of between 65 and 74 as a score. There were 4 people that landed in that category, or 4 test results that landed in that category. And then we've got 8 that went between 75 and 84, and 12 for 85 to 94%, and 4 people had between a 95 and 104%, because apparently I just offered extra credit. Didn't know it. So I'm going to set up my table now, or my graph, and they've already labeled it for us. We've got our label up here, and our other 2 labels. So I'm going to enter in my scores along the bottom. That will be my intervals, and then I'll be putting my frequencies along the side. So I'm going to do that now. Pause the video if you'd like to do it as well.
Pause the video. Pause the video.
And so when I wrote in my scores and my intervals, I showed that there were 4 of them that showed up for my 65 to 74, and then so on and so forth. So if I were to look at this and I'm going to interpret this graph, I would say that the lowest score possible was a 65, or the lowest score that people got was a 65 to 74 range, and that the highest was between 95 and 104 range. And then I'd say that most of the people had gotten between an 85 to 94%, and then maybe I would say that that how many people actually took the test in the first place were 28 students that took the test. So those are the pieces that I would mention. Now, that's the end of the required video, but this is going to be a couple extra examples from the next few pages of your chapter or this section. So if you want to continue watching, you want to take notes on these as well, it would help out if you wanted some extra examples. You can also pause the video and then work them out on your own and then check them with mine. So the first one we're going to look at will be number 17. And we're going to draw a histogram to represent this set of data. And they've given us the frequency table already, and they've even given us the graph labeled. We just have to fill in the different parts, like the intervals and the frequencies. So we're talking about home runs and how many people had a certain amount of home runs in a season. And so I'm going to set up my frequencies first on the bottom here where it says number of home runs. I'm going to set up my frequencies. or sorry, not my frequencies, my intervals, and then I'll be doing my frequencies along here. To figure out how much you want to skip count by on your frequencies, just figure out what you have here for your frequencies and make sure you cover all those numbers. Maybe you're going to skip count by 2s, 3s, 4s, whatever. All right, so if you're working on this and you'd like to try to do this on your own, go ahead and pause the video now. All right, so I've set up my table now, or my graph, showing the intervals as well as the frequencies. And I didn't have to fill all the way to the top on the frequencies because I only went from, up to 12 anyway. Now I'm going to enter in my actual bars. And remember that they are joined together. So if you want to pause the video again so that you can work on it, you can do that now. Okay, and here are my my bars that I've put on my histogram. Again, they're linked together. There's no space between the bars. And if I were to have to describe what's happening here, I'd say that, to interpret the graph, I would say that my graph falls between 0 to 9 home runs all the way up to 40 to 49 home runs. So there's no more than 49 and no less than 0 home runs, obviously. I can say that most people had 0 to 9 home runs, and that I took this, that there were, let's see how many people were in this. This is 18, 20, 36, that there were 36 kids that were in this season or played this season, something along those lines. I don't know anything about baseball, sorry. Oops. So number 18 is another example that we'll do. It says that Pillar is analyzing the frequency table below. Find her mistake and correct it. Apparently I chopped off this poor girl's face. I'll draw one. I'll draw one to make it. She's got pink eyes. All right. So now I've got the distance from home to school, and so I guess she was asking how close they live to school and what the distance is from home to school. And so we've got 0.1 to 0.5 miles, 0.6 to 1 mile, 1.1 mile to 1.5 miles, 1.6 miles to 2 miles. And she's saying that 15 people live less than 1.5 miles from school. She's including these three numbers on how many people live less than 1.5 miles from school. But in this data set right here, I don't know of those 5 people if any of them are 1.5 miles from school. If anyone's 1.5 exactly miles from school, they would be in this section. And because they don't give me specific numbers in my table and they're just giving us these ranges, I can't use these 5 people to answer this question. So one thing I could do if I wanted to include 15 people, then I would say it would be 1.6. I would change that to 1.6 miles so that this could be my cutoff, and all these people live between 0 to 1.5 miles of the school. Another thing that could be done is I could say, okay, it's going to be less than 1.1 miles from school, and then the answer would be 10 people. Okay, so I would say less than 1.1, and the answer would be 10 people. All right, so number 20 is going to be the last example I'm going to go over. It says the table shows the number of sit-ups each member of a gym class completed in 1 minute. Choose an appropriate scale in intervals and construct a histogram of the data. So it says the number of sit-ups in 1 minute. They didn't give us anything in our for our graph, and they didn't even give us a table. So we're going to have to set that up ourselves. So I'm going to set it up where I've got the, let's see. So this is my table that I'm going to use. I've got my sit-ups, my tallies, and my frequency columns. And then I've got the intervals that I chose. Now, because I found that my smallest number was 15 and that my largest number was 34, then I made my, I set these up so that they were 5 in each grouping. So it's 15 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34. And they gave me enough of the grouping. depending on how you changed your intervals will change how your tallies also worked out. So it might be different than mine. So then you just go through and you do your tallies based on your intervals, and let's see what we'll end up with. Go ahead and pause the video now if you'd like to. So I have two that are in the 15 to 19 range, 4 that are in the 20 to 24 range, 8 that are in the 25 to 29 range, and 6 that are in the 30 to 34 range. And then to double check to make sure that you got all of these numbers, you can add up your frequencies and then make sure that you have all of them in there. So if I'm now going to make my frequency table, I have to title it. It's going to be number of sit-ups. Number of sit-ups will be my horizontal line as well. And then this will be my frequency. But if I could spell it sideways, I would. Frequency. Trust me, it's like what that says. And now I'm going to put my intervals in. My intervals are going to be 15 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 30, and then, 25 to 29, 30 to 34. Now I can go back and enter in my frequencies based on what my frequencies are here. So if I have 2 through 8, then I'm going to go ahead and number it 2, 4, 6, 8, and I don't have to go any higher than that, so I'll stop there. Then I'll put in my table, or I'll fill in my bars. There's 2 for 15 to 19. For 20 to 24, there are 4. For 25 to 29, there are 8. And then for 30 to 34, there are 6. And so I've got, my data is all here, and if I were to interpret the data, I'd say that the number of sit-ups that each member in the class completed in 1 minute was between 15 and 34. That the most of the people, the majority of people, were able to do 25 to 29 sit-ups in 1 minute, because that's where my mode is, that's my most. And that I had 20 people in the class. All right, so that ends what we're doing here for this video. If there's any questions, make sure you ask me in class. That ends it for me today.